Hi everyone, welcome. I got a comment on a video recently questioning where I got my African nightcrawlers, and it's a bit difficult to see, but if you look closely on the label, when I've got systems where we've got ANCs living, African nightcrawlers, in very small text, I put a little note in there to indicate which batch of African nightcrawlers we're dealing with. So in the case of these two tubs over here, the little tiny bit of information next to the indicator of what types of worms we have in here are the three letters CWL, Crazy Worm Lady. Those of you who've been on the YouTube worm farming thing for more than 5 years will remember Emily, the Crazy Worm Lady. That channel went defunct a while ago, and the other source of my African nightcrawlers is another person who used to have a YouTube channel. That's Gaetano on the Northeast Worms channel, which over a year now hasn't produced any new videos. And that's what you're going to see over here, NEW. So these are not new African nightcrawlers. These are the African nightcrawlers I got from Northeast Worms. And these are the little guys that are targeted for my feeding today. These systems here are now 110 days old. Last time we checked in on these guys 12 days ago, it was only a couple days prior to their 100th day in service. That was feeding number 10. So today on day 110, we're coming in here to give them feeding number 11 after 12 days pause since the last check-in. So I've got some goodies for them. Let's get them up on the bench and we're going to get them fed. Here in this plastic container, we could see a couple days worth of coffee, as well as some frozen veggies and fruits. Or maybe it's just all veggies. I see cucumber peels, I see onion, I see tomato, and it's all been frozen with the exception of the coffee. I like freezing the stuff that I set aside for the worm feedings, giving me almost an unlimited amount of time in which to do away with this stuff. It's almost a blessing and a curse. So I've got certain things that have been sitting in my freezer waiting for just the right time to feed. I don't know why. I should just treat it all equally as just generic, as a single category of worm foods. But you know, I like it when I've got certain things that I can cherry pick in terms of, I mean, what's a good example? You know, there's sometimes when you want to know that the stuff you're feeding your worms is going to get broken down quite quickly. So sometimes I like having that choice of being able to reach into the freezer and get the worms a type of feeding that really matches my goals for the system. So now I watched the video from the last check-in really quickly. I didn't watch it through and through. I didn't even listen to it. I just sort of scrubbed through the video to see what we fed. There were banana peels given to the worms last time and coffee. And I do remember also how we placed a few sheets of cardboard right beneath the feeding. And it didn't seem like the cardboard was put in there fresh. I think that was cardboard that had already been placed into the worm bins on a feeding that came even prior. So since it was already showing up in the bins as leftovers last time, I did sort of anticipate that we would bump into those same sheets of cardboard down here in the feeding zone again, remaining as stuff that we can use to reconstruct the feeding zones. And there's other things down here that seem to have been quite well protected from worm activity. And I don't know if it's protected or were the worms just distracted by the other yummy things that are down here. I could see some of the leftover banana peel from last time, holding up quite well, and that's pretty typical of banana peel. And now, did I mix up what we fed them last time? Banana peel and coffee, so I didn't mix it up, I just omitted something. There was also this half of an apple, which most people who have fed apple to their worm bins know that there's something about the apple that really manages to resist breakdown quite nicely. And if I'm not mistaken, this is an interesting thing that we fed to the worms not long ago. It was a whole cucumber, or maybe half of a cucumber that was put in there. And the worms went inside the skin of the cucumber to chew out all the delicious, soft portions of it, leaving behind just the skin of it, which I know will also break down over time. But it's taking time to get there. That might even be a little additional piece of cucumber skin showing up as leftovers. The worms definitely operate in a opportunistic way, taking advantage of foods that they can break down right away. And, well, obviously if they can't break it down, they're not going to get much use of it, and they'll just move on. But when they swing back and find the stuff that was unedible previously, and perhaps at that point it is already at that stage of breakdown that they can take advantage of it, they'll do just that. So now that we've gone through bin number 1 to see what's what, I think we can basically expect more of the same here in bin number 2, because we do make an effort here to maintain a certain degree of consistency when we got brother bins or sister bins like these that were launched on the same day, have the same types of worms in them, have been managed almost identically throughout their existence. So for us to find a very similar setup in here is what's to be expected. I guess if there was something really different going on, then that might be reason for a little additional investigation as to the reason why, especially if whatever's going differently is a bad thing. Although, to me, it seems like anything going differently is worth investigation, whether it's good or bad, because if something is going better, then there too it's worth knowing, right? So that system can be further interrogated and investigated to try to get to the bottom of whatever it was that seemed to work really well, so that whatever that was can be mimicked elsewhere to get hopefully better results elsewhere too. So now we've opened up a couple feeding zones here in the worm bins. Plenty of space to put all of our leftovers back down in there, as well as some new stuff. And you know, since the new stuff includes a couple replacement coffee filters, we can reuse the old feeding zone indicators as supplemental bedding, but that's not a whole lot of supplemental bedding. I'm going to come in here with my prepared mix of shredded paper cardboard combined with leaves, but there's something special about this batch right here. I prepared a couple new bins recently that I felt were loaded with way too much material, into which I would be launching worms soon. So those pre-built bins were 50 days in the making after being built and the point at which we finally dropped worms into them. And that was already almost a week ago. So this material here has been aging for considerably longer than my prepared bedding usually does. So hopefully that's something that the wormies are going to appreciate, because that bedding right there was probably prepared over 2 months ago at this point, roughly speaking. So I'm going to begin coming back in here with some of the stuff that we encountered along the way. So we had a couple coffee filters, I remember, so we'll get those in there, and I believe that by dropping the yummy foods that we've got for them right on top, we should see pretty good reaction in terms of worms coming out to take advantage of that yummy feast, as well as the old partially consumed stuff that was in here already. So let's see how we can make this fit. We'll place the coffee in last, and we'll set the filters aside to be our replacement feeding zone indicators. So let's try to break apart this jumble of frozen, mostly cucumber peels, but you could see other things mixed in. Chunks of tomato, We've even got a pretty good sized chunk of cucumber right there. I even see an onion that appears to have gone bad. Let's make sure these guys get an onion too. And in the interest of being fair, we'll try to distribute the foods evenly. Now, the stuff I'm sprinkling in here is pulverized eggshell, which helps the worms break down the foods that they're eating, because it's grit that goes down into their gizzards. A gizzard is a form of stomach, basically speaking. It serves the same function as our stomachs, but our stomachs operate a little bit differently. We use acid in our stomachs to break down our foods, to extract the nutrients from them. Worms and birds, you'll recognize the word gizzard, probably more recognizable as a part of a bird's anatomy. But that's the thing that worms and birds share, is the manner in which they break down the foods they consume in their gizzards, using not acid but mechanical force, and the grit rubs up against the things that they've eaten and helps grind it down so that it can be further processed by their bodies. So that's the extent of my knowledge of the topic, so don't expect me to elaborate beyond that. But we're getting to the finish line here. Let's set our feeding zone indicators aside so we can bring in a little bit more material from the edges over here. I like covering up the feeding zones this way because it gives me a chance to inspect and also aerate the material that's on the outer edges. It does seem like we've got a good bit of moisture down there, which is nice. The worms are going to enjoy that. It's the reason I use plastic covers, to keep the moisture from being lost to evaporation. And it seems to work well. As the summer months eventually arrive, well, I'm maybe getting ahead of myself because the first day of spring was just a short while ago, so we're still talking a couple months before the official start of summer. But I guess what I was alluding to was, as the warmer temperatures roll in, I'll have less and less furnace activity in the house. Furnace in my house dries the air out. I have forced hot air, so by having very dry air in the house, I need to protect my systems from drying out. But what I find in the summertime is that the humid air combined with no furnace operating, the air in the house, including down here in the wormery, gets a lot more humid and has a far less tendency to draw moisture out of things. But at the present time, with the temperature still cooling down quite a bit at times, especially overnight, the furnace is still running regularly. And you know what? What I'm seeing over here is flying insects, including that one right there with the two critters connected to each other back to back, which means they're multiplying. Well, at least they're breeding. So the stuff I'm going to sprinkle in here is some of that mosquito dunks. Most people recognize mosquito dunks as a stuff that you drop in your pond or other standing water where you don't want to have mosquitoes breeding. But luckily the stuff can also be used to control the outbreak of flying insects in your wormery. So I've not seen too much flying insect activity yet, but when I do, I've learned that I should react without hesitation. Otherwise, it could lead to trouble. So that's it for our check-in, everyone. Hopefully you enjoyed it. If you did, as always, please don't forget to leave me a quick thumbs up before you go. That's always really appreciated. And if you haven't done so already, please also consider subscribing to the channel. That's very much appreciated as well. All right, everyone. Have a great day. Thanks for watching. Bye now.